Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. You have found your way over to the Jester Section Hiker podcast, your premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers. But this evening, the spotlight is on an amazing group of individuals with one common goal. And that is to find missing hikers, 3 hikers in particular that have gone missing on the Pacific Crest Trail. And for those of you that have been around the podcast a long time, you have heard me mention particular names. And I'm going to show these names to you guys. You guys should be familiar with Kris Sherpa Fowler, who went missing on the Pacific Crest Trail in October of 2016. You should be familiar with Cathy Tarr, who was on episode number 66 of the podcast. She is the executive director of the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. And you should be familiar with Sally Guyton Fowler, who is Kris Sherpa Fowler's mother. She and my sister were actually on episode number 82 of the show. And all of you should be very, very familiar with the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. As a podcast family, we have raised funds for the foundation. And so you guys, it is a great pleasure this evening to have on the author. She's actually authored 5 different books. And the first book that made me familiar with this author is Ranger Confidential, Living, Working, and Dying in the National Parks. And I will say, when I first purchased this book, I believe it was around 2011, 2012, I had no idea that, first of all, that I would have a podcast. Second of all, that she would be a guest on the show. And I want to make sure I give Miss Andrea Lankford a proper introduction. So I am going to read something to you all that will give context to this entire episode. So here goes. Trail of the Lost. The relentless search to bring home the missing hikers of the Pacific Crest Trail. Despite the ever-growing sprawl of civilization and the advent of smartphones, the American wilderness is still vast and treacherous. There are dozens of ways to die, hundreds of parks and forests to get lost in, and a million places that can easily conceal a corpse. Consequently, author, our guest this evening, Andrea Lankford, a former award-winning park ranger and investigator with the National Park Service's law enforcement team, is never surprised when someone disappears from the trail. She has led rescue missions across America, from Yosemite to the Grand Canyon, searching for lost hikers, downed aircraft, flash flood victims, homicidal fugitives from justice, and suicidal subjects. Most cases were eventually resolved, but the loose ends that remained, the hikers left unfound, haunted her. Growing frustrated with the service's bureaucratic idiosyncrasies and limited resources, Andrea reluctantly left the force after 12 years. 2 decades later, however, our guest this evening stumbled across a mystery that pulled her back where she left off. 3 young men, Kris Sylvia, Kris Fowler, and David O'Sullivan, have vanished from the 2,650-mile trek of the Pacific Crest Trail, and no one has been able to find them. Andrea's concern led her to the wild environment of missing person Facebook groups, and she joins forces with an eclectic team of amateurs who are determined to solve these cases by land and by screen. Through reports, news articles, screenshots, photographs, and maps of points where the hikers were last seen, readers of the new book, Trail of the Lost, will be taken for a breathtaking true crime adventure as the cases of the missing unfold. And you guys, it brings me no greater pleasure than to bring on author Miss Andrea Lankford. Hey, Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
And we have a nice little crowd in here this evening, so want to thank everybody who has joined us. And Andrea, I'm not done reading. So that was an excerpt from a bio that you sent to me. But I kind of want to kick off because I don't think your career has gone full circle. So you left the National Park Service as a law enforcement officer. In an excerpt from the current book, Trail of the Lost, you say the responsibilities I had shouldered as a first responder for an unfunded agency outweighed the benefits. In 1999, I left the National Park Service, stressed and sad by my decision to abandon a profession that once felt like a calling. I first sought solace by hiking the Appalachian Trail. Then I wrote a few books, returned to school, and became a registered nurse. But 12 years as a park ranger was enough to forever tarnish my love of the great outdoors. So, Andrea, before we connect and tie everything together, I have got to ask you about being a law enforcement ranger for the National Park Service. So take us back to those days.
Yeah, so I got a degree in forestry from the University of Tennessee in 1986, and I never saw myself becoming a law enforcement officer. I thought I would work outdoors, maybe with animals or with botany or trees. But I had a boyfriend that was working for the National Park Service seasonal, and he just convinced me to go to a seasonal law enforcement ranger academy and to get trained to shoot guns and put handcuffs on people. And that sounded like fun, and I didn't have a job yet. So I went to that and got hired at Cape Hatteras National Seashore. And right away, I got thrown into the reality of what being a park ranger really is. Because I was responsible for enforcing laws, I had to rescue people, respond to fatalities, and then even got into wildland firefighting right off the bat. So as some of you know, a park ranger wears many hats, and a law enforcement ranger is doing all of those things, not just being a law enforcement ranger. And right away, you start seeing the darker side behind the scenery.
So let's talk about, so I know you've seen a lot of rescues, because tonight we are going to turn our focus to your new book and 3 gentlemen that are currently still missing on the PCT. So in your early days as, with the Park Service, did you ever imagine that there would be as many missing people rescues, search and rescue issues as you found?
No. And then after I left Cape Hatteras, I went to Zion and then Yosemite and the Grand Canyon. And especially at Yosemite and the Grand Canyon, these are probably 2 of the busiest search and rescue, wilderness search and rescue areas in the nation, if not the world. And so right away, I was just dealing with a lot of body recoveries, a lot of people that needed help, a lot of people that needed rescues, sometimes people that were lost and needed to be found. And it was hundreds of cases. I lost count of how many rescues I personally responded to. When I was at the Grand Canyon, I supervised the inner canyon corridor, and my district alone saw 285 rescues one year. And
wow. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, people come to the national parks and they get hurt. Sometimes they die, and it's a park ranger's job to help those people.
How did you deal with that? You were young when you were a park ranger. You were in your 20s going into your 30s, and now this day and age, there's this huge talk about mental health. How did you deal with the mental aspect of it, of what you saw, what you were going through? And, if you all have not read the book, Ranger Confidential. That needs to be on your list to purchase very soon, because you will hear some of these stories that Andrea is talking about. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We deal with it different ways. Sometimes you just shut down, and you almost have to. In Ranger Confidential, I tell a story about a fatality I show up to, and at first I feel like you feel like a little panic or flutter inside, but as a professional, it's like a curtain coming down behind you, and you're on stage, and it's time to perform or act, because that person needs you to set all your emotions aside and respond to the incident. And of course, later, sometimes we use tombstone humor. We're debriefings later. And it's hard, but sometimes it bothers you more later, like when you think about it later, because at the time you're too busy to think about it.
And I imagine it's all the adrenaline flowing, everything that's going on around you. Not to mention you're in a national park. So the attention that stuff might be, that a case might get or not get, would hit you later as well. And at the end of the day, is that what really led you to walk away from that career?
It played a role, but no, I would say it's put that you have rangers overworked, understaffed, responding to, crazy hard stuff, dangerous things. And the management isn't as supportive as you think they should be. The public thinks you have the best job in the world. You're just sipping coffee on the front porch of a cabin, right? And
Yeah.
so it just, and
You're going out, you're hiking every day, and yeah, life is good.
right. Yeah, and the pay is not comparable to what it should be for what you're having to do. And so I would say it's that constellation of things that played a role in me decided to leave the National Park Service. It's burnout. It's basically a burnout. I left because I was burned out.
But what was inside of you, it seems that it didn't really leave. Some of those instincts, we're going to talk about this now, like that burning inside when, and you specifically mentioned when hikers are not found.
Yes. Well, and then I became a nurse. So obviously there was something inside me that still wanted to help people. But that's sort of leading into the case that probably inspired me to write Trail the Lost. In 1995, I was a ranger at the Grand Canyon, and I was in charge of the operations of a search mission for a missing 28-year-old man who had gone missing on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And I and the people who worked under me, we couldn't find him. We didn't find him. But I was with his father every day, communicating with his father. I was looking at pictures of his high school graduation, and it really bothered me that I couldn't find that young man. And so later, he was also 28. It really reminded me of that case at the Grand Canyon. And that is why I just couldn't let it go. I couldn't stop thinking about it.
And while you were in the Grand Canyon, I think if I remember this correctly, you started a preventative search and rescue effort. Tell us about that.
So in the late 90s, it had been happening for about 13 years. Visitation was going up. There was a lot of heat, and people in the Grand Canyon were just having more and more trouble, especially during the hot summer days. And it was just getting unbearable. Too many people were dying. We had the deadliest hiking season on record. And the rangers knew, and our superiors, we had to do something for the staff, but also just to save lives so that people weren't dying. And so we all got together. There was several of us that got together as a planning group, and we developed a PSAR program. PSAR is preventative search and rescue. So that means let's keep the rescue from happening in the first place. Let's keep the person from going missing in the first place. And we started that program, and they're still doing it today. And if you look at the stats, before we initiate this PSAR program, the SAR incidents were going up like this. The year after, it goes like this. It goes down. And so it was successful. It continues to be successful. So PSAR works. Preventative search and rescue works. So when you see these messages at a trailhead, when you see something on a website that is trying to teach you safety information before you go hiking, it works. Pay attention to it.
What were some of those messages within that effort that you were trying to get out to hikers?
Well, with the great, each place has its own hazards, each environment, as you know. And at the Grand Canyon, what was happening is people wanted to hike down in the middle of the day and hike out in the middle of the afternoon and have their lunch, dinner reservation. One of our messages was to hike early, alpine start type stuff. Hike in the dark even, bring a flashlight. It's okay. It's more pleasant in the dark. So that was one thing, timing, to get them to do different timing. Also not to bite off as much as they, more than they could chew, do 2 miles instead of 8, for example. Another interesting one, Julie, I don't know if you heard of hikers getting hyponatremia, where they drink too much water.
I have, but usually I've heard the opposite, hypothermia. Yes. So talk about that.
Well, what was happening is we were given a strong message: hydrate or die, drink water, drink water. And people were listening, and they would start to feel bad and be in the canyon, and they would drink more water, too much water. And so they were getting water intoxication is another name for it. And they are diluting themselves. And so their blood sodium goes down. That's the hyponatremia. And this affects your brain. Your brain can't function, and you can die from that, or you can end up in the ICU. So we started to change our message to, drink enough water, but, keep your urine a mellow yellow color. Also bring salty snacks. Make sure you eat salty snacks.
And now with electrolytes, add that. Now
Yes.
It's real easy, with the drink mixes and things like that, to add those electrolytes in. And I think the coolest thing in the world is they're still using that PSAR effort that you put together.
Yes, they are. And they've improved on it significantly. So it's just beautiful to see.
Awesome. So we have to talk about this. So you left the National Park Service, and we do have a couple questions that we will get to for those of you that are in the chat. But then you went on this hiatus and did a bunch of amazing adventuring. You thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail. You kayaked from Miami to Key West. I mean, crazy. And you were the first the first 2 people, you and a friend of yours, Beth, to mountain bike the 800 miles of the Arizona Trail. So is this something that you always wanted to do, or were you like, I'm done and I'm going adventuring and I'm going to hike the AT? Like, talk us through these. I mean, these are crazy, awesome adventures.
Yeah. So, when I was working for the Park Service, I went into it because I love nature, right? And it was starting to taint that love. And so I think I wanted to immerse myself into it where I wasn't responsible for other people, just myself, and enjoy myself in nature. And the Appalachian Trail, really healed me a lot. And people helped me, trail angels helped me, and that healed me to be the one who was helped for a change. And so then I just had a lot of confidence and heck, let's do these things. And so I noticed that the Arizona Trail had never been thru-hiked before. And so me and my friend Beth, I said, let's be the ones to do it. So we planned a route, and we did that. And then she also went with me with another thru-hiking friend, and we're the ones who kayaked from Miami to Key West. And then I also cycled from just north of Fairbanks to the Arctic Ocean in Alaska.
Now, I forgot about the cycling. So, we have to give it up for our cyclists and our kayakers that are now in the chat. So talk about that kayaking trip.
Well, fortunately, I have a good friend, Monica Wool. She goes by Moonshine when she was an AT thru-hiker. and she and her husband owned a kayak shop in Key Largo. So they really knew what they were doing. So we did it with them. And so I got to give a lot of credit to them for organizing that trip. But it was beautiful. That was actually a beautiful trip. There's bugs and heat and everything, but we loved it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what time of year did you guys do that trip?
May. I believe we did it in May.
Okay. And this bike across Alaska, yeah, talk about that.
Well, I'll tell you my favorite story. Looks like, okay, I'm back.
Yep,
My
you're
favorite
back.
story. So it's the Dalton Highway, and that goes up to Prudhoe Bay, so the Arctic Ocean, and there's a lot of oil workers and construction workers, and they drive in semis on this dirt road. And we were told, watch out for those guys. They aren't going to like that you have bikes on this road. They're not going to like you girls doing this. So we're like, well, okay, whatever. So we're doing our bike packing, we're riding. We're about 4 or 5 days in, and I see this semi truck coming toward us from the opposite direction. And we're biking toward him, and he slams on the brake, and I see him fishtailing. He's slamming his brakes so hard. And I'm like, whoa, okay, what's going to happen? So we bike up to this guy, and he's this big bear of a semi truck driver. And he rolls down the window, and he says, hey, you girls, come over here. So we go over there, and he says, I got something for you. And he hands out this box, and it's full of donuts. He says, you girls are great. Here's these donuts. Of course, we're starving. You know how it is when you're
driving. Oh yeah.
We're just eating those donuts, and he saw how hungry we were. Here's some Skittles. Here's some other stuff. You girls are awesome. So I learned there. I mean, I already knew, but sometimes when people say people aren't going to like you doing this, they're wrong.
They really don't know because they're not actually out there doing it. So they just assume since they don't want to do it, that nobody else, would want anybody else doing it as well. There is a comment in the chat from my friend and business partner, Austin, over at Side Trail Adventures. He says, and he's an avid kayaker, he says, that's a lot of open water.
Yeah, it was the first, I think it was the first day, and we had 25 knots winds and some small craft advisory, but we got through it.
See, that's a language I don't understand. Yeah. So, not only are you an author of, 5 amazing books, one on the way, you're also an amazing outdoors woman, and you certainly have completed a lot of adventures. And he says solid type 2 fun, it sounds like. And with your your PSAR efforts, let's go now. So after that, so you've written books, you went back to school, and you've become a nurse. So you've rangered, you've adventured, and now you're like, well, maybe I'll just be a nurse. Or how did that come to play?
Well, I thought nursing would be, because you can work 3/12s, you could do travel nursing for 13 weeks. I thought it would be a job that would give me a lot of flexibility to still do the outdoor activities that I wanted to do. I needed a way to make money. And, I love being a nurse. I ended up being a nurse longer than I was a ranger. So I identify with that almost as much as I identify with being a park ranger.
And you're still registered as a nurse, is that right?
Yes.
I don't know how you do it all. You're just...
I don't either. I get exhausted sometimes. Yeah, I wear myself out sometimes, I admit.
So let's talk about this connection. And this is the first time that you and I've met. And I really want to paint the story because, 2016 really changed the way that I look at hiking and preventative search and rescue and being safe out there. And the connection is, for me, is Kris Sherpa Fowler going missing. He's one of the gentlemen that you mentioned in your book. Sally Guyton Fowler, his mother, who you extensively mention in the book, the executive director of the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation, Cathy Tarr, who you mention in the book, and, the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. But there something was missing or pulling at your heartstrings when I think you were contacted by a production company that wanted to do a film or something on missing hikers. So walk us through how your connection began with Cathy, Sally, Kris, and the other two gentlemen that are still missing on the trail.
Yeah, so in 2017, I was consulting for a production company wanting to do a show about missing hikers. And they had sent me some cases to review, and one of them was the Kris Sylvia case. And he had disappeared from the Pacific Crest Trail in 2015. And that case, it was, near Los Angeles, about 3-hour drive from Los Angeles. It's there near Warner Springs, Anza area is where he was last seen. And his gear was found on the trail, and he was 28, and he was living in his roommate's apartment. He immediately reminded me of that case in 1995, the Gabrielle Parker case. You'll read, if you read the book, you'll know about it. And I just felt two things. One, I felt so bad for the family because I could see his brother talking about the case online and hoping. He had been contacted by the producers of the production company, and he had mentioned that on Reddit. And I could see he had placed a lot of hope in Hollywood attention solving this case. And that broke my heart. Also because it reminded me of the other case. And also because Sylvia's gear had been found on the trail. I thought this case is solvable when I saw that. So I called his brother and talked to his mother and asked for their blessing. Could I just, I said, I don't know, but I just promise you I'll get you some answers. And I've just investigated pro bono. And they both said, yeah, please do.
So tell us a little bit, as much as you can. I mean, we don't want to give away everything in the book. We want people to buy the book because we want to spread the word about these cases. So, tell us some of what you found or what you didn't find or anything that was interesting.
Yeah, because, this is a real thing. So, some of you might not want spoilers, so
Yeah.
you might want to learn it through the book. So just be aware of that if you're listening to this. But I did find clues. That one, I found a book that Kris Sylvia was carrying with him, but it wasn't with his backpack. It was in another location.
Wow.
And so that was like, whoa, what does that mean? And, in the book, I go through a lot of different contemplations of what that might mean, that his book was found somewhere else. And I also learned about a lot of hazards on the trail that people might not think about. One being marijuana grows, rattlesnakes, homicidal maniacs that are on the trail. Later, that gets in later in the book, there's a kidnapper that was kidnapping PCT hikers. So I just started to learn about all these other threats that weren't what we first think about when we're thinking of the PCT. And also there's, with Kris Sylvia, there's the 12 tribes.
Yeah.
Are you aware of the 12 tribes, Julia?
Yeah. Yeah. We have well, I don't know if I think it is the 12 tribes. They have a couple hostels on the Appalachian Trail, the Yellow Deli. I think it's the Yellow Deli Hostel or something like that. Yeah, I'm familiar with that, yes. Word spreads quickly a lot about these things up and down the trail. Yeah, so did that lead you to the connection? Kris Sylvia, is that what led you to the connection with Cathy Tarr?
Well, in a way. So I'll back up a bit. Now, first of all, for those of you who don't know, 12 Tribes is a religious community. They meet some definitions of a cult. They're not super dangerous, but it isn't compelling that perhaps hikers could be enticed to join their group and then disconnect from family. So that's why they're a theory of what might have happened to one or more of the PCT missing. But what happened with Cathy is I met her early on because as I looked into the Kris Sylvia case, I always look for patterns. Who else is going missing? Who else is dying on the PCT? What are the circumstances around those cases? And so sure enough, right away I'm learning about Kris Fowler and David O'Sullivan. And just to kind of set it up, Kris Sylvia went missing in 2015, Southern California. Then Kris Fowler went missing in 2016 in Washington State. Then David O'Sullivan went missing in 2017. also in Southern California near Idlewild. So it was 111, a young male, one each year, 3 years in a row. So that's how I learned about Sally Fowler's webpage or Facebook, Bring Kris Sherpa Fowler Home. And I was watching everybody, all the people that were trying to help. I was very impressed with them and intrigued by them. And the one who intrigued me the most was Cathy Tarr, because she was close to me in age and she just seemed very motivated and positive. And I heard she was going to come down to Southern California to search for David O'Sullivan. And I was just so impressed. So I begged her to meet me so that we could compare notes. And we met in Hemet, California. And just right away, I just fell in love with her in a way. And I just asked her if I could document her journey as she was trying to find both those guys, Kris Fowler and David O'Sullivan. That's what started me getting in with a group.
So talk about what you know. I'm going to save Kris for the third individual. So talk about what you know about David O'Sullivan.
So meeting Cathy, she filled me in at that time. And David O'Sullivan is from Ireland, a really nice, disciplined young man. And he heard about the Pacific Crest Trail by reading Wild. That's what inspired him, at least. And he traveled from Ireland to the United States in 2017 to hike the trail. And he made it up to Idlewild, and then he just went off the map.
So just for reference, so Kris Sylvia and David O'Sullivan, Idlewild is how far north? So if you start at the southern terminus, they got how far?
Okay. Off the top of my head, I don't know the exact mileage, but let's see. I want to say 127 was where Kris.
Early on.
127.4 is where Kris Sylvia's gear was found. Now, off the top of my head, it's about 50-something miles north of there is Idlewild, and that's where David O'Sullivan was last seen.
So in Appalachian Trail purposes, for us East Coasters, that would be starting at Springer Mountain and maybe getting to Winding Stair, Franklin. Yeah.
So relatively early on. Yes.
Yeah.
And so the David O'Sullivan, is Idlewild. He was just getting ready to head into the San Jacinto Mountains when he disappeared.
Which I am totally scared of now. Like
Yeah.
it's dangerous. Let's just be real. And I think a lot of hikers don't think, they're like, oh, I have trail legs by then, I can get through anything. So continue talking about David and then the San Jacinto Mountains specifically.
Yes. So David, he was a novice. He was new to hiking. He was young, and he's from Ireland, where the mountains aren't that high. And as you know, Julie, that they don't quite fathom what altitude can do and elevation changes. And so what happens in San Jacinto, everybody's done the desert section of the PCT. It's been hot usually. It's been sunny. Not always, but often. Then they get to the San Jacintos that are in Idlewild. Oh, the weather's great. And they start hiking up. But before too long, they're at 9,000 feet. And there's the icy slopes that are quite treacherous. It's early. It might be March. It might be April. And they're not prepared for it mentally or even with their gear. And we're going to talk about this later, I guess. But that's one of the things Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation is trying to prevent, so that hikers are prepared with gear before they get up into the San Jacinto's, the dangerous section.
Well, we could talk about that now, because the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation, they have a microspikes program. Now, you definitely need to carry microspikes and be able to self-arrest with an ice axe. And I've never done that. So and probably a lot of hikers from the East Coast, oh, I finished the AT, I can do anything. Now I'm going to hike the PCT, and they don't have this gear.
Yes. And one of the heroes in my book is John King, the San Jac John. He does the trail report. And so before you hike up into the San Jacintos, you need to go to his website and read the trail report. And he'll tell you exactly what the trail conditions are on that trail report. And you'll know what you need to bring with you.
Yeah, and I'll make sure I'll put that in the show notes. That way, people have access and everything we're going to be talking about, whether it's in the show notes right now. I will make sure that that information is there. So yeah, so David O'Sullivan. I mean, do we think he just tragically fell, or is any of his gear found? Where are we at with David O'Sullivan?
Well, what's hard with any case that's unsolved is what might have happened to them. The people who have died, let's see, what is it? I'm looking at my statistics here. There's been 16 deaths on the Pacific Crest Trail that we know about, and it's been a natural hazard that has gotten these people, and 4 of them were slid off an icy slope. So I usually, being a ranger and seeing all that, I usually go to it was a natural hazard that got someone or killed someone. But there's just enough when you can't find a body, and there's these other things like the 12 tribes and, kidnappers and marijuana farmers that have been violent on the Pacific Crest Trail. It makes you question yourself, and it's concerning. And obviously it's probably really concerning for the parents to not know what happened.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions. Actually, my dad put it in the chat. He said, "What would you say to families still hoping to find lost loved ones, either short or long-term missing?"
Yeah, I wish I had an easy answer for them. I've never had a missing loved one, but I've been close to these families enough to really empathize with them. You can't move on. People are gonna try to tell you to move on. I know you can't. But you have to take care of yourself sometimes. You have to take a break from it. Drink water, get some sleep. You're just gonna have to take care of yourself for the long haul, perhaps. And that is another good service that the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation gives. Is there's a support group, a peer support group for anyone who has a current missing loved one that's a hiker. It's specifically for missing hikers, this particular one, or you were in that situation for a while. Even if your loved one has been found, you could be a part of that group. And I hear that is great. That's really helpful for people.
I've heard it's a tremendous group, and I have to give Cathy Tarr accolades for that, because she actually introduced a term to me. It's called ambiguous loss. And that group is an ambiguous loss group. And again, another thing that the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation does, not only do they have a microspikes program for those hikers, down in the beginning stages. I always called it San Jacinto. I don't know if I'm saying that right anymore. And then they also have, the ambiguous loss support group. So another amazing thing that the foundation does. And we do have another question. Belinda in the chat says, are there places that one could just get lost and searchers couldn't even see them? I would say yes.
Yeah, for sure. And the San Jacinto seems to be one of those places. The United States, especially in the West, it is vast and treacherous in spots, and it is not. It is surprising that we can't find people with our technology that we have and their manpower and dogs that we have, but you can get lost and not found.
So Trail of the Lost, it consists of Kris Sylvia, David O'Sullivan, and then the case that hits really home to me. They all hit home, but the one that really hits home is the case of Kris Sherpa Fowler, who my younger sister is best friends with his mother, Sally Guyton Fowler. And again, if you all have not listened to that episode with Sally, let me look here. It is episode number 82 of this show with Sally and my sister, because my sister is actually mentioned in your new book, not by name, but she is actually mentioned as part of the story. Let's talk about Kris.
Yeah, so Kris Fowler, he was a seasoned hiker by 34, and he was had made it all the way from Mexico into Washington State. He's starting to enter the North Cascades in Washington. And a storm was coming in, and he started north from White Pass on October 12th, 2016, and there's been no sign of him since then. And so his stepmother, Sally Fowler, initiated her own investigation. When a thru-hiker goes missing, it can be extremely frustrating because it's not just one national park or one county or even necessarily one state. You're hiking a 2,000 plus trail, right? Where did you disappear? Also, hikers hitchhike, and they bump around. And so it makes it very hard to plan a search because your search area is potentially huge. And so Sally and her former husband, Kris's dad, Mike Fowler, they struggled in the beginning to get law enforcement to take them seriously. And they eventually prevailed, and they did open up a missing hiker case. Sally in particular is extremely brave. I'm very honored that, through Cathy, I learned more about Sally and introduced myself to Sally, and she agreed also to let me document her journey to try to find Kris. And, I just think the world of both Cathy and Sally. They're very brave to share their hearts with us.
So this is probably going to be a tough question for families to hear, but a reality. What's the likeliness that these three will be found? I mean, especially with, David and Sherpa, Kris Sherpa Fowler, no gear, no nothing, what can we do? What can people do that are listening to this episode? Hopefully people will share this episode, buy the book, donate to the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. But I guess I'm asking you as an investigator, a former ranger, what are we looking at?
Yeah, I don't think I can answer the question of what the likelihood is they're going to be found, because a lot of missing person cases are found by accident. So there's always that chance that someone, a hunter, a mushroom searcher, a hiker goes behind a tree to go to the bathroom, and they're going to see something. So there you go. That's the first thing. If you see something, write it down, photograph it, document it, and then report it. If the law enforcement won't take you seriously, you can report it to the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation, or if it has to do with a particular area, let's say it's near where Kris Fowler disappeared in Washington, you could send it to the Facebook group. And I promise you a team will try to follow up on that lead. And that can go for any trail you're on. When I talk about the Kris Sylvia case, there's a hiker, Eric Trockman, and he took a photo of Kris Sylvia's gear when he saw it. And so that's documented, what that gear looks like. And you never know. So just a lead like that might solve a case.
I'm just thinking of how many times I've walked past gear that looks odd to me, and it's like, oh, that doesn't seem right. The first thing that pops in my mind is not take a picture, but maybe these are some things that we need to think about. Like, I've seen shirts just hanging there. I've seen packs just laying on the ground for no reason. I'm just thinking of things that I've seen just randomly hiking out on the trail that I could have documented that maybe would have helped something, who knows what. But these are just things and tips that you're giving now that I'm thinking about too.
Yeah, I'd say if it feels just the slightest bit odd or weird or out of place, just take a picture of it, and it'll have the date and time there in your picture, right?
Yeah.
So, you can throw away the picture years later maybe, but you have it there in case and that's what happened with Eric Trockman. He got home, he got on Facebook, he later heard a hiker was missing, and it turned out he had photographed that hiker's gear. So kudos to him for doing that. And, pay attention when you go to the trailhead, just take a glance. Hike that trail, you can be alert. Maybe you'll find a clue. I'm trying to, join the Facebook groups of missing hikers in your area. So that way you'll be up to date on any leads. I think Cathy Tarr came up with this one, which is pretty good, especially if you're a trail angel. Maybe keep track of the hikers you give rides to. Just a little note. It was a hiker with a black shirt and a beard and about 20 years old or whatever. That way, if you've given a ride to somebody that later turns up missing, you'll know the date and time that you picked them up. So
Yeah,
these are
that's a
some
real
things.
good one because the likelihood of a trail angel seeing somebody is very high.
Yes, yes, and the trail angel can help, lock in where that person was last seen. Because if they were at their hostel or in their car on a certain date, you can say, oh, they were here at this date. And if they have a good description and a good date, that could be a huge help.
So let's close out by talking about the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. And I don't know if sadly is the right word, but this foundation was formed because two gentlemen went missing and are missing on the PCT. David O'Sullivan and Kris Sherpa Fowler, therefore the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. And the foundation is doing amazing things. Like we said, they've got I forgot the word, a microspikes program. Down at the southern end of the PCT, there's the ambiguous loss group, and there is the InReach giveaway program for PCT through hikers and section hikers. And what's your involvement with the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation? And I am sure that since you know Cathy Tarr, you saw the inception of this happening.
Yeah, yes, I was a founding board member, and so I participated in, first creating with a team of people, of great people, and we worked together to form the foundation. And then today,
Well,
what I
Andrea, my
do,
apologies on that. I guess I didn't
yeah,
realize you were a founding board member, so I do apologize about that.
that's okay. Yeah, no problem. And then with Trail of the Lost, 10% of, if you buy Trail of the Lost, 10% of anything I make of that is going to go to the Fowler-Sullivan Foundation. And
Awesome.
also, I still work cases. My husband, because of Cathy Tarr, started a drone pilot program, and my husband is one of the drone pilots got trained. So I work with my husband to do grid drone searches to try to find missing hikers. And the last case we worked was a Dennis Burton case just outside of Death Valley. So I still will work cases and help with any leads.
Yeah, because I think on the website I saw that you were a contributing friend, I think. But I apologize. I did not know you were a founding board member. So thank you for that. And thank you for all that you are doing. And, one of the things I want to say with you is that, I have a platform here with the podcast. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do with the platform is promote good, promote good and, promote things that will educate and help people. And this is a prime episode of really what I want to do in the future of the podcast. We can all talk about our hikes and how wonderful everything is, but, sometimes not everything's all wonderful. And, we do need to educate, and we do need to have people come on our platforms and share what they're doing. And I'm just so thankful that you were willing to come on and share what you're doing, because when people get this book and they read this book, it's going to go way more in depth of your investigations and what you're doing. And you also mentioned to me before we started going live that is what you want to do with the book as well. So talk about that.
Uh, yeah, I hope the book helps hikers to be safer and prevent them from going missing in the first place. I hope that the word gets out about these cases, and there's somebody out there that saw something and they just didn't know that, they had given a ride to a hiker that's now missing, and that maybe this lead will lead to one or more of these cases being solved. I also hope this book helps get awareness about the Fowler-Sullivan Foundation, and people, either volunteer their expertise or donate, because the donations are going to really good stuff like training those drone pilots and going to try to help find other missing hikers, including the PCT missing. So, And just what you said, that's one of things that inspired me is there's all these people like Cathy Tarr and Sally Fowler and Morgan Clements and John King and the O'Sullivans that were giving of themselves, even when they themselves were suffering from personal tragedies or crises or health problems. And they were dedicating themselves to help others for nothing in return. So it's just a really heartwarming story. As horrible as it is that these guys are still missing, some good things have come out of us working together.
100%. 100%. And I do want to mention some comments and a couple more questions that were in the chat. And as we were talking, I totally forgot I could pull these up. I got so engrossed at what we were talking. Craig says, or Hawk, his trail name is Hawk. He says he just wants to thank Andrea for all she has done for helping complete strangers. Much love. So thank you for that. And Marcia O'Rourke. I hope I'm saying your name right. I have seen you tons on Facebook. I feel like I know you. And she says, are there plans for new searches for all three this coming season?
Yeah, Marcia, we need to apply our skill sets. That's an inside joke for Marcia. But I hope so. I know Cathy is definitely interested in following up on something with David O'Sullivan. Perhaps if we get just the right lead and we can narrow down a search area for Kris Fowler, that would be great to organize another search for that. And Chris Sylvia as well. I feel like I need another lead. I feel like there's somebody out there that saw something, and I'm hoping they come forward and give me something to follow up on.
I hope we can come back on here very soon and talk about good news and talk about, follow up, something from your book is something somebody heard somewhere. Belinda says this has been good info. She's seen abandoned tents and gear on the trails before. Yeah. So stuff is out there. Now we know what to do. We need to, if you got it, I call it like that feeling in my gut. Like if something's not right, it's probably not right. And Stella says she's already pre-ordered her copy of the book, available 8/22. And Marcia says, LOL. So she got what you were saying. Cathy says that her and Sally are meeting tomorrow to review their notes. So there's some positive news, some good things going on. And Mighty Dog, or listen, take a hike. You changed your name. So Mighty Dog says, thank you again, Jester, for another great episode, and Andrea for all you've done and continue to do. And then Stella says again, your resolve and dedication is amazing. Thank you. And the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. And I will just put like a call to action out there. I don't know what else to call it. That if you have a Facebook account, an Instagram account, share about the book, share this episode, share about the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. And one of the things that in my mind is everybody knows leave no trace, right? I mean, that's pretty LNT, right? Mm-hmm. So why does it leave no trace equal hiker safety? Why does it hiker safety 10 essentials roll off of people like leave no trace? So I'm on a mission. We got to make this happen in the hiker world. I don't know if hiker safety is just not sexy. I'm not sure what it is. Leave no trace isn't sexy either, but I don't know. I just don't know. It doesn't connect to me why we don't equal the two or put hiker safety higher than leave no trace.
Hey, you're a woman of my own heart, Julie, because, PSAR is where it's at. Let's stop this stuff before it happens, and let's not put rescuers at risk and searchers at risk too. So PSAR, hiker safety, I'm with you. It should be right up there with leave no trace.
Yeah. Let's really get this thing going, whatever we have to do. And again, I can't, use our platforms. If you have one follower on Instagram or Facebook, then that's one person that could actually share it and, and move it forward. So, Andrea, I literally cannot thank you enough. And like I said, when I bought this book in 2011 or 2012 and read about your service at in our national parks as a law enforcement ranger, I never in a million years would have thought we would have connected somewhat via the Pacific Crest Trail. So, it must be something to do with that Appalachian Trail thing that we have going for us as well. There's something in the hiker community.
Yeah. It's the tramily, the trail.
Exactly.
Family.
There you go. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. I couldn't think of the word family for some reason.
Mm-hmm. and we're going to watch out for each other.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. So Andrea, everybody in the chat is very grateful, and everybody watching, whether they said anything in the chat or not, is very grateful. And you guys, one more time, the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation, thru-hikers, for those of you that pray, put them in your prayers, put their families in your prayers. And, the power of prayer can do a lot of things. And I'll just leave it with that. And Andrea, if you'll hang on 1 second, I'm going to switch over the screen and close this out, and don't go anywhere until after we're done. So you guys, I cannot thank you all enough for being here. Andrea, I know you could hear me. I thank you again for coming on. And, this is the kind of stuff I want to do going forward. I'm actually getting ready to take a break from the show for the rest of the summer. I will be back sometime in August. I'm not sure. But, I need a break, and I want to figure out how to utilize this platform for the good, for education. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that something comes up for one of these three gentlemen and their families. And you guys, until the next episode, I really appreciate you listening. Be safe out there, and happy section hiking.